Ms. Ustyugova, thank you very much for this opportunity. So first question is nearly a year and a half have passed since the Velvet Revolution in Armenia. What is your assessment on Armenian economy during this period and for this moment?
Thank you for the question. It's always a pleasure talking to you. So over the last 2 years, as you have seen, macroeconomic situation has been stable. The GDP has been growing, inflation has been subdued, the financial sector has demonstrated resilience, and credit growth has been supporting economic activity. Tax revenues have been rising and helped with fiscal consolidation. So all in all, the macroeconomic situation has been good. But the structural issues are still there. As you know, the unemployment level is high, the poverty is high, the economy still remains vulnerable to external shocks. The growth is narrowly based, so there are lots of structural issues. The good thing is that the current macroeconomic situation creates favorable environment for accelerating structural reforms to deal with the structural issues.
And the bad thing is?
The bad thing is there are no bad things. Like I think the key bottleneck is to press ahead with the reforms, but in a comprehensive, sustainable manner, thinking about consequent steps and ensuring coordination among the key policymakers.
During past year, IMF has published 3 reports. Its assessment including economic situation in Armenia. So, in October in last year, your assessment for Armenian economy for this year, 4.8%. So growth in April in this year for Armenian economy 2019, 4.6% growth, and last month 6%. Can we say that the situation in Armenian economy has improved during this past year?
We can say that the growth has been higher than we expected. You're right, we have been revising our growth forecast upwards. This is mostly because the consumption has been much stronger than anticipated consumption, and mostly private consumption. So it's a good thing that the economic activity has been growing. The not so good thing is that it has been driven consumption rather than investment, because it is the investment that is the key major building block for the future growth. So the challenge remains how to generate sustainable long-term growth, and sustainable long-term growth that is driven by investment and exports rather than consumption.
In your opinion, why investors don't decide to invest money in Armenian economy?
I think we can agree that the last years Armenia has been going through a transition period. This is a period when the authorities are still working on their strategies, their major transformation strategy. The authorities are still developing a set of priorities that will be guiding the economy in the future. So in a sense, it's a wait-and-see approach that is guiding some investors. Some investors also need to rethink their investment plans in the regional context, given the upcoming reforms that the authorities are planning.
Mr. Ustyugova, Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan speaks about economic revolution. Do you see any fundamental changes in Armenian economy? Did you see any fundamental changes in Armenia during past year and a half period?
Let me address this question by telling you about the changes that we have seen under the IMF-supported program. As you know, we reached an agreement with the Armenian authorities on a new IMF-supported standby arrangement not so long ago, in May 2019. So it's a new program, a new 3-year loan program that includes a comprehensive, ambitious reform agenda, economic reform agenda, that covers fiscal policy, monetary policy, financial sector block, like governance. So I'm pleased to say that the program is off to a good start. We had an IMF team visiting Yerevan just a month ago. Our program tracks the progress through the set of quantitative benchmarks and so-called like structural benchmarks. The quantitative benchmarks that were set for June, they were all achieved. And there is important progress on structural front. Let me just name a few things that have been in the focus of the IMF program. Revenue mobilization, for example, we see notable progress in that area. There is a new tax administration strategy that it was approved by the government that sets out the steps and the action plan how to achieve more ambitious revenue targets. Those were discussed with the IMF team. PPP law, in line with the best practices, was approved. There was a progress with the registry of beneficial ownership. There were important changes and progress again with the anti-corruption strategy and the anti-corruption body, like how the thinking is being involved. The central bank is working on expanding and strengthening further macroprudential toolkit. It is also implementing the latest recommendation of the financial stability, financial sector assessment program. So these are all steps, but these are all like elements of one ambitious program that will be implemented over the next 3 years.
As you know, the tax burden will be reduced beginning next year. So in terms of small and medium business, what kind of results we can expect?
Tax burden beginning the next year will be redistributed, right? So the reform package includes two parts. The first part, as you rightly pointed out, includes lower personal income tax, lower corporate income tax, and simplified taxation and lower tax burden for small, medium enterprises. And the idea here is to create and enhance incentives to work and invest, to stimulate growth, to enhance compliance. And for small, medium enterprises, simplified taxation and lower tax burden can help raise self-employment that could translate to lower poverty. This is all important. The second part of the package is also important because it includes offsetting measures that would offset potential tax revenue losses from the first part of the package. And this is planned to be done through higher excise tax rates. Preventing tax losses is important. Why? Because Armenia is facing important investment needs into infrastructure and human capital, and good infrastructure and human capital are as important for small, medium enterprises and investment overall as lower taxes. And another point that it is important to keep in mind is on impact on equity. And here I'm thinking about personal income taxation, right? The move from the progressive taxation to the flat system and higher excise taxes. It remains to be seen how it will affect the equity. And the good thing is that the authorities are thinking about, are committed to overhauling property taxation over the next 2 years. And this is an important shift from taxing income in a progressive way to taxing assets in a progressive way, which is a strong way to deal with inequality.
The Armenian state debt has exceeded $7 billion. So do you see any problem here?
I do not see. Consider it to be a red flag. Mm-hmm. And let me explain you why. So it would be more useful to think in terms of debt to GDP ratio when we think about a country's ability to service its debt. And you're right that the debt has been growing in absolute term, but as a share of GDP, it has actually been declining over the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. And you know that the IMF regularly conducts the debt sustainability assessment. And the last one, the fresh one, was published not so long ago in June. According to our analysis, Armenian state debt is sustainable. Of course, the large share of foreign exchange denominated debt in the total debt is a source of vulnerability, but there are such mitigating factors as the average duration of the debt is relatively long, plus most good portion of the debt on concessional terms. And then, as you've seen, the latest Eurobond rollover showed that Armenia benefited from lower interest rates globally, and the rollover risks did not materialize. So all in all, we think that we still think that the debt is elevated, right? And it's the Ministry of Finance pursues the policy of fiscal consolidation to reduce the debt level. However, the debt is sustainable.
Ms. Ustyugova, is the IMF going to launch a new major project with Armenia?
Well, our new program is only 6 months old. We still have 2.5 years to go. It's a 3-year long program, so we plan to continue with this program. It's a standby arrangement. The authorities plan to use it, to consider it as a precautionary, which means that they're using this program as an insurance if in case there are shocks that would affect macroeconomic stability, and hopefully it won't happen. We will have biennial reviews. The first review will be considered by the board in early December, the IMF board of directors in early December. But we will continue with the existing program.
According to Armenian state budget, next year we would have 4.9% economic growth. So what is your assessment as IMF representative to Armenia? Your forecasts on economic growth for next year?
So for the next year, I think our growth projections are very much in line with the authorities' projections. So if we, for this year, we project growth to be at around 6.57%, speaking about the upward revisions, right? But for the next year, in the medium term, we see the growth in between 4.5 and 5%. So I think it's a reasonable assumption for the upcoming for the upcoming budget.
I'm sorry, you said 6.5%, right?
Yes, the team that was in Yerevan yet again revised the growth projection. And so we see it in between 6.5 and 7%. Even 7%, but again, driven by consumption.
Yeah.
And so the level is good, the composition to be improved.
Not by investors, but by consumption.
Private consumption.
I guess that's positive impact of revolution,
So the level is good. The composition is to be improved, but it's good that the reform agenda is being accelerated.
Thank you very much for this interview.
You're welcome.